What's poppin'? Welcome to a web edition of Real Ones. I am Logan Murdoch. That is Howard Beck. We are here to see if your team is real or fake coming into this postseason. Let's talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves, who I don't think anyone trusts to do anything good in this moment. Despite how good they've been throughout the regular season, a lot of that has to do with past postseasons where they just didn't seem like they had the requisite heart to be able to move deep into the postseason. Other than Anthony Edwards, who has been amazing this season, an MVP candidate, and just one of the best players. But do you trust anyone other than Anthony Edwards to show up in the biggest moment in franchise history going into this postseason, Howard Beck?
It is the biggest question, and it's a fair question. I agree with all that. I guess the first question is, can we trust them not to punch each other or punch any walls as they head into the postseason? Because that would be the first thing, right? Like, make sure all your guys are actually available and not fighting with each other or with inanimate objects. But I do broadly trust this team. That may not be the majority opinion, but, like, I trust Mike Conley Jr., right? Like, got a lot of miles on him, but I absolutely trust Mike Conley to bring it in the playoffs and keep that group steady. I trust Rudy Gobert. I know that not everybody does, but the guy's, a proven commodity in this league. I trust Naz Reid. I trust Kyle Anderson. I trust Jaden McDaniels. I think what I don't trust is, and this is where we have to qualify things, right? We are recording this at a time that Karl Anthony Towns' status for the postseason is still unknown. Maybe by the time folks are listening and watching this, we will know it. But as of right now, we don't know what his status is. Is he back? Is he playing? What level can he give them in the playoffs? And without him, the question becomes, if Anthony Edwards is having an off night for whatever reason, where's their scoring punch? Where is that outlet? Who's that second guy? Because this team doesn't have a lot of offensive punch shot creation without those two guys. And if it's just the Anthony Edwards show and everybody else is mostly spot up shooters, a little bit of slashing, whatever here and there, but like there's nobody else who's really going to generate a ton of offense for you. That becomes the big concern.
You mentioned Karl Towns. He tore his meniscus earlier this season, and by all intents and purposes is trying to make a run to play in the postseason. And I think it gets a little dicey, Howard, with an injury like the meniscus and a knee, and also just coming back from any serious injury going into the postseason and adjusting to that speed in real time after you have rehabbed and all of those things. What is your concern level with Karl Anthony Towns' injury going into this postseason, no matter if he's playing or not? Is that a cause for concern when you do have a knee injury like a meniscus and you're trying to play at a postseason speed and also at a postseason physicality?
Yeah, it's asking a lot of him, right? And Towns has had his ups and downs in this league. And so there's going to be a lot of eyes and a lot of scrutiny on him. And yeah, you don't want to push it, but like it's the playoffs. You have to give everything you can. It is the biggest unknown for their postseason. And the fact is, like you start looking at who they might play, right? And eventually it's the Nuggets, right? Like eventually the question becomes for all these teams, can you beat the Nuggets? So they can't beat the Nuggets without Karl Anthony Towns. I'm not sure if they could beat him with Karl Anthony Towns, but they definitely can't beat him if he is either out or still hobbled, not back to 100%. Teams are going, this is the playoffs. This is when teams actually scheme for you and spend hours and hours and hours poring over film and coming up with game plans to try to stop your best guys. If there's no Karl Anthony Towns, teams are absolutely going to sell out, overload, trying to stop Anthony Edwards. And then where do you go from there? So, there's no way around the Towns question. And unfortunately, because they've had a phenomenal season, they've been a revelation, they've been a lot of fun. Unfortunately, at this stage, you look at them and you have some serious doubts because partially the inexperience in the playoffs and partially because of Towns' status.
If you are the Minnesota Timberwolves right now, and it's wild to say this for a top 3 seed in the Western Conference, but which team, I'm going to give you a list, that the Timberwolves should be scared of, out of the Kings, out of the Suns, out of the Lakers, out of the Mavericks, and out of the Warriors?
The Lakers and Warriors always jump to the top of that list for me because of the championship experience. And I know people think like sometimes we put a little bit too much stock in that. You're not the same team you were for the Lakers in 2020 or the Warriors in 2022. But if I'm a young team with no playoff success to speak of, the last guy I want to see ever is LeBron James. And the other last guy I want to see ever is Steph Curry, because it doesn't matter how much younger and sprier or maybe deeper you are, those guys are scary. And I could say the same thing, obviously, for Kevin Durant and to an extent Devin Booker, but the Suns have been, I feel like, a little bit all over the map. Granted, they've been better than the Warriors and Lakers, so it's unfair for me to knock them down a peg, but I am. The two guys I'm fearing most are Steph and LeBron, and therefore it's the Lakers and Warriors.
I wrote this in our Ringer Dream matchup piece, first round matchup piece on the site. Go make sure you guys check that out. I like the Mavericks against the Timberwolves. I really like the battle of wills that will happen. I think Luka and Kyrie can demoralize this team, and I think that will be a fun series. I just want to put that out there, just as one of the series the one series that people aren't talking about when it comes to who the Timberwolves can match up against. My last question for you on this one, on this team is, we know that the front office went all in to get Rudy Gobert a couple of years back. It was kind of dicey on if it worked or not last season, right? And then now they're going into this season where they've been playing really well. But as we've talked about throughout this whole segment, we're not very high on the Timberwolves. Now, if they do flame out in the way that we think that there's a chance that they could, what happens to this iteration of the roster if it doesn't work?
Yeah. There's a question of like what happens even if it does work, right? I mean, if it does work, whatever work means, right? Conference finals, you can accept a lot bigger tax bill, but they already have luxury tax issues and apron issues and all that stuff. Most folks around the league expect that there's going to be a Karl Anthony Towns trade sooner than later, not necessarily because of fit issues, although there's a little bit of an element of that too, but because they just can't afford to pay all these guys in perpetuity and still have any roster flexibility. But everybody's got their limits. And especially if you did flame out early, and granted, caveat, if they flame out early and it's because Towns wasn't available or was still hobbled, you take that into consideration. But if you're at full strength and you flame out, then you have to say, well, maybe this group is not the right alignment. And the Towns issue and the tax issues and everything really come into play. So, but I'm going to just say this, like, I think there's better chance than not that no matter what happens in this playoff run, that they're entertaining Towns offers this summer.
What would that do for? That's so interesting that even after all of this, and I agree with you, he's probably going to, at least be considered to be shipped out this summer. But for a guy like Towns, who was so steeped in Minnesota sports in this team, one of the probably the second best player behind Garnett to put on a Timberwolves uniform. What would his legacy be in Minnesota if he does get shipped off in this way, where he, in a lot of essence, got replaced by another franchise pillar in Anthony Edwards?
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, I think a lot of people are already ready to put Anthony Edwards as number 2 behind KG in franchise history. Though Towns has the longer track record and obviously, just the bigger compilation of stats so far. But yeah, their success and their promise is really all tied up in Anthony Edwards at this point, right? Like, wherever they go, it's going to be because of how far Anthony Edwards can take them. Now, if Towns is a great co-star to him, great, but they do, again, they have to figure out the payroll, and they gave Naz Reid a pretty nice contract last summer. Like, they have other bigs that they have a lot of money invested in. You cannot have a Rudy Gobert and a Towns and a Naz Reid all making what they're making, and have that function in today's NBA. So I just think that piece is inevitable. Plus, you can get a lot out of that, right? If you're trading Karl Anthony Towns, you're probably bringing back multiple cheaper pieces that are now helping you fill out the roster and rotation. And some of those guys are then obviously more tradable as well because they're on smaller deals. So there's a lot of advantages to doing that way. I don't mean to say this as a way to dump on Towns, who's been fantastic for them in a lot of ways, but there are just certain realities you have to deal with in this league.
All right, Howard. It's time for the moment of the segment. Are the Timberwolves real or fake?
I say this with as much respect as I can, but fake. Fake, if mostly because I don't trust Towns' health right now. Again, we're doing this at a time where we don't know what his health is going to be for the playoffs. And I don't really trust Towns' track record overall either. So it's not a knock on the Timberwolves overall because I think they have great potential for years to come here. I just don't think they're ready for prime time right now.
I think they're looking real synthetic right now, Howard. I think
synthetic.
That any team, I think any team in the bottom of the Western Conference is hoping and praying and on their knees, just wishing that they play against the Timberwolves in the first round. They can't wait. I think there's a lot, and that's an opportunity for the Minnesota Timberwolves to show the world that they are real. But I cannot co-sign their realness at this point. They are fake. Extra synthetic, pleather, all the vibes. We'll see what happens, but that's where I stand right now.